Welcome back to Two Pretty Good Bad Men, an Alias Smith & Jones podcast. I'm your cupid, Tabitha, and today we are taking a look at Season 3, Episode 3, The McCreedy Feud. Yes, the exciting conclusion to the long-running McCreedy-Armendariz feud. This episode was shot in early to mid-August in LA and on July 14th in Utah of 1972. It aired September 30th, 1972. Fun fact, that would have been my mom's 6th birthday. The story was by Roy Huggins, and the teleplay was by Juanita Bartlett. Finally, a second woman writer! And the episode was directed once again by Alexander Singer. Juanita Bartlett's first job in the industry was in the script writing department for a radio interview show in New York. From there, she worked as a secretary for people like Pat Boone and Richard Crenna. Eventually, she got a job reading scripts for James Garner's approval, and that led her to her first staff writing gig on Garner's short-lived series Nichols. When Nichols was canceled, she was brought on to write for Garner's next series, The Rockford Files. She also served as a producer on that show, and it earned her 2 Emmy nominations. She even wrote 4 of the Rockford Files made-for-TV movies. Bartlett also wrote for Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, The Greatest American Hero, Scarecrow and Mrs. King, and Spencer for Hire. She passed away in 2014 at age 86. We have a lot of returning guest stars this week, too. Burl Ives and Cesar Romero are back as Big Mac McCreedy and Ernesto Armendariz, respectively. This will be both men's last appearance. Say goodbye and thank you to both of them. And Dennis Fimple is back as Kyle for his last appearance. Everybody say goodbye, Dennis, and thank you for making Kyle so lovable. Our only new major guest star this week is Katy Jurado as Carlota Armendariz. Jurado was born in Mexico in 1924 and made her film debut in 1943 in the movie No Matares. She made a name for herself in Mexican cinema. She even got to work with Buñuel in his movie The Brute. She really crossed over into Hollywood in the movie High Noon. She went on to get an Oscar nomination for the movie Broken Lance. She was the first Latina to receive such a nomination, which is amazing, and she deserves all the respect for that. She still continued to work in Mexican cinema while working in Hollywood. She was in other films like Trapeze, The Badlanders, One-Eyed Jacks, and Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. On television, she was in shows like The Virginian, Beretta, The Westerner, and Death Valley Days. She passed away in 2002 at age 78. And that is it for our guest stars. Much like last week, it's a small guest cast. So let's see how this feud ends. The boys are riding along through the wilderness, and Kid wants to know what they're doing there. Getting $500, apparently. They're riding into the Armendariz ranch. Kid is not happy about going back there because they were just there 6 months ago. Okay, no, they were not, no. Because last time they were on that ranch was way back in the McCreedy bus, episode 2, and that was in no way 6 months ago. That was like 2 years ago. 18 months if I'm being kind, but 6 months? Not possible. Not after Smiler with a gun, not after Night of the Red Dog. Anyway, they get surrounded by Armendariz's men, and cue credits. They're escorted to the ranch, which looks way bigger and cooler since the last time we saw it. Once they get inside, they see the bust of Caesar, and Hayes says it's kind of like seeing an old friend. Girl, I feel the same way. Armendariz's sister, Carlotta, greets them. She apologizes for all the gun pointing, but she would also like to know who they are and what they're doing there. They'd rather wait for her brother since Mr. McCreedy sent them on official business. And once Carlotta hears the name McCreedy, her tune changes and she has them locked in one of the rooms. While they're waiting around, Hayes notes that Carlotta introduced herself as Miss Armendariz, so she's not married. Interesting. Kid tells them to just stop that train of thought immediately. Eventually, Armendariz arrives, and Cesar Romero is honestly looking quite the silver fox. He's totally uninterested in anything that McCreedy has to say, and tells them in his gentlemanly way to either get out now or he'll fuck them up. They take the first option. They get back to Big Mac's ranch, and he is not happy. If you'll all remember, this feud is only partially about the bust of Caesar. The border between their ranches is the Rio Grande, and when it shifts, so does the land, and that's what the main dispute is over. Big Mac rants about how stubborn Armendariz is, which, really? But oddly, he does thank the boys for trying and lets them leave. Without their $500, of course, but still, for him, that's pretty generous. They didn't manage to set up the meeting, so technically they didn't do the job. I'm actually not really against him on this one. Hayes thinks he has an ace up his sleeve. He tells Big Mac that he's got a way to solve his problem for all time. He's interested, but it's going to cost him. The $500 that they're owed already, and an additional $4,500 if the plan works. And the plan is to have Big Mac marry Carlotta. They tell him that she's indescribably beautiful and super into him. With their families joined, the land problem will be solved. He's convinced enough to let them ride back to Armandirez's ranch. On the way, Kid says that this is never going to work because her family hates Big Mac, and Hayes argues that she's never even met him, and besides, she is a woman who needs a man. Okay, Hayes, you're being sexist right now, and I don't like it. Back at the ranch, the boys meet Carlotta again, and they try to talk Big Mac up to her. He's so brave and tough and charming, and also super into her. And she's like, I will not be flattered into talking to my brother on his behalf. She leaves them, and the kid's like, I told you. Hayes says that the kid's problem is that he's always looking for ways things can go wrong, whereas Hayes is always looking for ways that they can go right. You know what? I'd say that that's a fair assessment of them, and it's why they work well together. They're taken into the house to see Armandirez again. I think you are trying his patience, my boys. He compares them to mosquitoes constantly irritating him. Probably best to just destroy them and have a little peace. But they insist that they just want to deliver Big Mac's message. Big Mac is willing to sell him a big piece of his land, so when the river moves again, it'll still be his land. Armandirez is not here for that, because when the river moves over, that will make it his land anyway, without having to pay for it. He's giving them one last chance to go. They can go away forever, or they can stay there. Forever. They go, for now. When it gets dark, when it gets day for night, they secretly ride back to the ranch. All the while, Kid is whining about how it's not gonna work. Kid, try and be optimistic for a change. They scope out the place, and Hayes thinks he knows which window is Carlotta's room. The kid is skeptical, but Hayes says that he was blessed with the tracking sense of a hound dog. Hayes, that's simply not true. Not only can you not track, as has been demonstrated, but you have already failed way back in Season 1 to correctly identify a woman's window. Remember? It was never trust an honest man. Sure enough, they knock on the window, and a very angry gentleman with a rifle answers. With the whole household now awake, the boys claim that they just got lost. Yeah, Armandirez isn't buying that, but he's still merciful enough not to kill them. He'll just keep them locked up for the night and have his men escort him to the border the next day. And then Hayes has the nerve to ask Carlotta to get them some food. Hayes! And she actually does! Granted, he did it so he could talk to her alone, but still! They're left alone in the same locked room they were in earlier, and Kid's mad again. That is a running theme with him this season. He reminds Hayes that Armandirez and Big Mac have been battling it out for years, and Armandirez never loses. Always comes out on top. Hayes says that there's a first time for everything. Carlotta brings them their food, and they tell her that Big Mac wants to meet her in person. He likes a woman with spirit, and she's got lots of that. She said she would never marry, quote, a Yankee Protestant. Hey! That really hurts. But then they tell her that actually Big Mac is Catholic. She doubts this, but they lay it on as thick as possible. She still turns down the meeting. And Hayes doesn't understand why this isn't working. Why won't they meet? The next morning, as they prepare to leave, Carlotta stops them. She asks them where Big Mac attends Mass, since there is no Catholic church in Red Rock. She tells them to invite him to attend her church, and she'll be there on Friday. But purely speaking as one Christian to another. And oh, Hayes is feeling smug. They get back to Big Mac, and he's feeling pretty smug too. They tell him that he might not be so happy once they tell him that they told her he's Catholic. And Big Mac goes quiet, shuts the door, and asks how that they knew that. Yeah, that's right. Coincidentally, Big Mac actually is Catholic, and they just pretend that they knew that the whole time, and promise not to tell anyone. This is hysterical to me. Carlotta heads out to the church, but she and her party are kidnapped on the way. Meanwhile, Big Mac is waiting in the church. There's a moment where Hayes and Kid enter. Hayes takes his hat off, and then he kind of elbows Kid to make sure he takes his off too. It's a cute little moment. They tell Mac that Carlotta was kidnapped, and his response? Armandirez is gonna kill me. No, they'll simply have to find her. And then they have to help Mac onto his horse. Like, they actually have to help heft him up onto his horse. Does he have, like, people who do that for him normally? Is, like, that someone on his staff's job help him on his horse? Carlotta and her party are being held at some empty house, and she's ranting in Spanish. They hear gunfire and duck to the floor. She thinks it's her brother coming to rescue her, but actually it's Big Mac McCreedy. She's clever enough to ask how the hell he knew where she was, and he says that the whole town was talking about it, and he just asked some questions and found the location. And she's a bit charmed by him. The boys enter and say that all the kidnappers are taken care of, and he can see the lady safely home. He tells her that he'd like her permission to call on her, and she says she would be honored. He tells her that even with all the boys have said about her, they didn't come close to doing her justice, and she returns the sentiment. Okay, this is actually cute. They're cute. I'm not gonna lie. Like, he honestly is into her, and she honestly is into him, and it's kind of adorable. I never thought I'd say that about Big Mac, but there you go. Big Mac and Carlotta ride off, and Kid's amazed that this is working now. Then they go and see the, quote, kidnappers and tell them that they'd better get moving before someone spots them. That's right, the boys set this kidnapping up to make Big Mac look like a hero. It's like they reverse Gone Girled her. Okay, normally I'd talk about what an awful thing that is to do, but this story is so frothy that I can't take it that seriously. And since Big Mac thought the kidnapping was legit, I can let it slide. The next day, Hayes, Kid, and Big Mac are riding back to his ranch when Armendariz' men start pursuing him. They hit Hayes' horse and he goes down. Oh, I hope the horsey's okay. Naturally, the Kid goes back for him, but Big Mac just keeps riding. Coward. The boys get taken back once again to the ranch, and Armendariz believes that Big Mac arranged this kidnapping. Well, that's just not true. But Armendariz is super pissed about it. He says no one in the area would dare kidnap his sister. It must have been Big Mac's doing. Like, he has his men cock their rifles and aim them at the boys' heads. Would he actually do it? I don't know. He's given them so many chances so far that it kind of makes me feel like he's all talk. But anyway, Hayes sticks to his guns and swears that Big Mac had nothing to do with it. They're interrupted when some of his men come into the house in a panic. They all speak in Spanish, and Armendariz runs out of the house. That evening, the boys are locked in their favorite room again. When he comes back to inform them that Carlotta is missing, he blames McCreedy again. He's going to hold one of the guys right here, and the other has to go and fetch Big Mac. If he's innocent, he'll come along. But if not, well, he's going to have to kill the one he keeps. He'll let them decide who's staying and who's going. Kid figures since the whole thing was Hayes' idea, he should stay, and Kid will go get Mac. Hayes counters that he's got a better chance of talking Mac into coming back. Kid's willing to risk that, and he goes back for Mac. But when he gets there, Big Mac and Carlotta are just finishing up their wedding ceremony. Yes, they are now lawfully wedded man and wife. It's so cute, and Carlotta has such a sweet and shy smile. Well, that all worked itself out. In the next scene, Big Mac is counting out money for the boys. Since he's Armendariz's family now, they worked it out so that the land that keeps changing because of the shifting river won't be owned by either of them. It will belong to Carlotta. What about the bust of Caesar? Whose house does that stay in? They don't address this, and I feel like that will still be a point of contention. Anyway, Mac tries to stiff them again, claiming that they set up the meeting at the church, which never took place, so they don't deserve the $4,500. Oh my God, Mac. I hope that every gooey butter cake you bite into is a lemon bar. The boys take him outside to reveal that Kyle and some of the other Devil's Hole gang members were the bandits behind the kidnapping. He has to pay them each $100 and give our boys the rest of their $5,000 in exchange for never telling Carlotta about this. I feel a little bit bad for him because he really thought he was a hero and saved her life. Oh well, she still loves him. In the tag, the boys ride towards the border. Not really, because it's Utah. But they're planning on hiding out in Santa Marta with their $5,000. Hayes stops and says that they can't go there. And I agree, they shouldn't go back to the town where the kid was nearly executed for murder. But that's not what Hayes means. They can't go without Clementine. Yup. Because it would look too suspicious for two American men to set up house together in Mexico. Like, how do you mean? Like in a gay way? Or what? And even so, can't you take George instead? I miss my wife, George. So they ride off to get Clementine, making this the only episode of the series to directly lead into the next. The end. This one's okay. It's cute. It's nice to see the feud get wrapped up, but it's pretty light. I like Carlotta. She's savvy, but I love how shy she gets when she actually meets Mac, and I like seeing Big Mac actually fall for her. The line of the episode goes to the kid. When Carlotta asks at the beginning if they noticed all those no trespassing signs, he says, "I pointed them out to my friend one by one all the way down here." I believe he actually did that. And the episode goes to Hayes, since this was all his idea and he did get them paid. Next time on Alias Smith and Jones, Hayes, Kid, and, yes, Clementine all go down to Santa Marta to lay low for a while. Research for this podcast comes mainly from the wonderful book Alias Smith and Jones, the story of two pretty good bad men by Sandra K. Segala and Joanne M. Bagwell. Additional research on Juanita Bartlett comes from Emmys.com. Thank you for listening.